Welcome, everyone. Ready to dive deep into Gurdjieff with me again?
Always fascinating to explore his ideas.
Today, we're looking at Life is Real, Only Then, When I Am. And it's, well, unfinished. It was supposed to be a part of a third series of his writings, but even as a draft, wow. Gurdjieff's thoughts on, what makes a person, they're just so powerful.
It's incredible, right?
Yeah.
Even incomplete, these pieces give us insight into his, I guess you could say, thought process, like watching a philosophical system being built.
Exactly. And speaking of building this guy's life, right? 3 near-death experiences, all from stray bullets. Crete, Tibet, Transcaucasia. How does that even happen?
It makes you wonder, doesn't it? How facing death not once but 3 times like that, how that shapes a person's whole outlook on life. Makes sense he'd be drawn to, well, deeper meaning, the esoteric side of things.
Pushing boundaries, not just in travel and adventure, but mentally and spiritually too. Which brings us to the Institute for the Harmonious Development of Man. He founded that to share all this knowledge he'd gathered.
Ambitious project, to say the least. He wanted to classify students based on their understanding. Even had plans for these clubs to spread his ideas more widely. Large-scale impact was definitely on his mind.
Like a blueprint for, conscious evolution almost, but then boom, the Russian Revolution. And a serious car accident on top of it all. Life, huh? Throws you curveballs.
And yet, he adapted. Shifted his focus to writing instead,
Right.
often in public, cafes and such. Can you imagine, amongst all that hustle and bustle, these profound reflections on humanity being written?
And it's during this time he starts noticing something unsettling among his followers. He called it a psychic peculiarity, particularly those trying to apply his teachings. Some American followers, he even compared them to candidates for the madhouse. Strong words.
Got to consider the context, though. He saw this mainly in those who, well, they were mimicking the techniques without the inner work, the form without the substance. To him, that was a symptom of something bigger. Society losing touch with itself, relying on, I guess, blind imitation.
So not just a critique of individuals, but of modern life as a whole.
Exactly. This psychic peculiarity, it was like a warning sign. Superficiality, obsession with quick fixes, losing our inner selves in the process.
Sounds familiar, doesn't it? Information overload, self-help gurus everywhere. Maybe Gurdjieff was ahead of his time. This whole thing with Orage and the group reorganization, that just adds another layer to it. Orage was leading Gurdjieff's American group. Then Gurdjieff decides to change everything. Strict conditions for joining, no contact with anyone outside the group, Orage included, or you pay a fine. Can you imagine?
Classic Gurdjieff, right?
No.
Unconventional methods, creating a very specific environment. He believed disrupting those ingrained habits, getting uncomfortable, that was key to growth. Probably came from his own experiences, realizing that real change comes from, well, facing limitations head on.
Not your typical self-improvement advice, that's for sure. It's like he's testing their commitment, seeing how far they'll go. And Orage's reaction, he just agrees. He even says he wants to be an ordinary member. What a twist.
Speaks volumes about Orage, doesn't it? Letting go of that leadership position. He understood what Gurdjieff was doing, the need for humility, surrendering to something bigger. Like he knew, true leadership can mean being a devoted student.
So we've got a man who faced death multiple times, journeyed for knowledge, founded an institute, challenged societal norms, all pointing to this deep, almost radical commitment to inner transformation. Where do we go from here with this deep dive?
From here, we're going deeper into his core ideas. Things like the 3 worlds of man and how he viewed suffering, not as something to avoid, but as a tool. We'll also get into self-observation and his unique perspective on death and the soul itself. Gurdjieff's life, not exactly conventional, and his ideas, well, as we're seeing, they follow suit, challenging people to really look inward, face those limitations, and be a part of their own, evolution.
Not your typical self-help stuff, that's for sure. Gurdjieff seemed to believe real change, it took work, discipline, not being afraid to get a little uncomfortable.
Absolutely. And his idea of the 3 worlds of man, that really highlights this active approach. He described these worlds as like different levels of, I guess you could say, psychic functioning, each one shaping how we see and react to things.
Yeah, this idea really struck me too the first time I came across it. It's like he's mapping out, the different levels we exist on, from the purely external to the deep internal stuff.
Exactly. So the first world, that's all about external impressions.
Yeah.
Everything hitting us from the outside, constantly, sights, sounds, smells, sensations, basically how we experience the world through our senses.
Okay, and then the second world, that's more like our internal landscape. Our instincts, emotional reactions, all those subconscious patterns driving our behavior.
Precisely. It's the world of automatic responses, ingrained habits, emotional conditioning, where our unconscious stuff lives, our motivations, our fears, often pulling the strings without us even knowing it.
And then bridging these two, we have the world of man, the third world. That's where conscious effort comes into play, right?
Yes. The third world, it's all about potential. The potential for real self-awareness, for making intentional choices. It's about bringing those first two worlds together, becoming conscious of both what's happening out there and how we're reacting to it inside. Then, making a choice about how to respond.
So it's not just about mindfulness of what's around us, but understanding why we react the way we do, and then being able to choose a different course of action if we need to.
You got it. Gurdjieff believed most people, they're operating mainly in those first two worlds,
Yeah.
driven by external stuff and those unconscious patterns. But that third world, that's the key to breaking free, becoming truly self-directed.
It's like we're sleepwalking until we activate that third world, that ability to choose.
Powerful way to put it. And he was very clear. Activating that takes effort, intentional effort, and a willingness to face, even embrace those habitual patterns. He even saw suffering not as something to avoid, but as a tool for growth. Intentional suffering, he called it.
That's where it gets interesting and maybe a little, I don't know, challenging to our modern way of thinking. We tend to avoid suffering at all costs, right? Comfort and ease are the goals.
It's understandable. But Gurdjieff wasn't saying go seek out pain. He believed that by engaging with those challenges, difficulties, on purpose, that's how we gain deeper understanding, build resilience. It's like using those experiences as fuel for transformation instead of letting them crush us.
Not about punishment then, but seeing those tough spots as chances to grow, to strengthen ourselves from the inside out.
Exactly. It's about approaching those situations with awareness, intention, using them to break down old patterns, build new, better ways of being.
This connects back to that psychic peculiarity he saw in his followers, doesn't it? Those who were fixated on the outer forms of his teachings without doing the real work, the inner work. They were trying to skip the hard parts, the discomfort that comes with real growth.
Precisely. Gurdjieff knew, deep down, real transformation means facing our limitations, getting uncomfortable. And those unconventional methods of his, like those strict group conditions, they were all designed to create those situations.
He definitely knew how to shake things up. And speaking of which, that whole group reorganization, that fine for those who didn't immediately sign on, that must have been a shock. What do you think he was trying to achieve with that approach?
I think it's another example of him using those, let's call them unique methods, to challenge complacency, force people to become more self-aware. Remember, disrupting those habits, that was essential for him, breaking free from those limitations of the first two world and waking up that third world potential.
So a deliberate disruption, a shock to the system, to force a choice, to get people to step into their own development more fully.
Very insightful. And Orge's reaction, right, giving up his leadership, embracing the conditions, it shows a deep understanding of what Gurdjieff was doing, that commitment to the work.
Embodying those principles, humility, surrender, willingness to step into the unknown.
Exactly. And it highlights how important it can be to have a guide, a teacher, someone who'll challenge us, push us past our comfort zones, and create the conditions for real transformation to happen.
Gurdjieff definitely seems to have filled that role for a lot of people. But it's clear he also expected a certain level of, I guess, seriousness from those wanting to learn.
Absolutely. He wasn't looking for casual followers or those looking for a quick fix. He wanted people who were dedicated to the path, even if it meant facing some tough truths about themselves and about the world.
Which brings us to his emphasis on self-observation. And I mean, not just philosophical thinking, but specific exercises.
The exercises for developing the impulses of I am, I can, and I wish.
Exactly. Those impulses, he saw them as fundamental to becoming a genuine human being, capable of conscious choice, intentional action.
He saw them as potentials within us, waiting to be, awakened and nurtured. But he also knew just thinking about them, saying the words, that wasn't enough. He wanted people to experience them directly, to embody them through effort and practice.
So how did he suggest we cultivate these impulses? What did these exercises involve?
He had a variety of practices. One of them involved dividing your attention between sensing, feeling, and rhythmic movement. Imagine walking down the street, but you're paying attention to the feeling of your feet on the ground, the air on your skin, the rhythm of your breath, all at the same time.
Multitasking for the soul, huh? Sounds challenging. What's the point of dividing attention like that?
It's about breaking down our usual ways of perceiving, developing a richer awareness of ourselves and our surroundings. He believed by bringing attention to these different parts of ourselves, we could start to disentangle from those automatic reactions that tend to run the show.
Expanding awareness, becoming more present.
Exactly. And through this kind of self-observation, we can start to see ourselves more objectively, recognizing our strengths and weaknesses, and making, I guess you could say, better choices about how we live.
Like taking control of the ship instead of being tossed around by the waves of circumstance and impulse.
Yeah. Another great analogy. And this idea of taking control, being the captain of your own ship, that's at the heart of Gurdjieff's teaching. We have the potential to consciously create our lives instead of just being, well, a product of fate.
But being the captain, that takes self-knowledge, right? Understanding how our ship works, its strengths, weaknesses, how to weather those inevitable storms.
Absolutely. And Gurdjieff's methods, those challenging exercises, the group dynamics, they were all about helping us develop that self-knowledge, mastering the art of navigation, so to speak.
It's amazing how he brought everything together. Personal experiences, observations of humanity, esoteric knowledge, into a whole system for inner transformation.
Yes, and it's important to remember this wasn't just about personal growth. It was about understanding our place in the universe, our connection to something bigger.
Which leads us to his thoughts on death and the soul. A very different perspective, I think, than what's common today.
His critique of how we avoid talking about death, contrasting it with those remembering feasts, definitely challenges our usual views. But maybe there's something to learn from those older traditions, something we've lost in our, sanitized way of dealing with mortality.
So what exactly were these remembering feasts? What was their purpose?
They were gatherings to honor the dead. But unlike our memorials today, which focus on the good, these feasts, they involved a more honest reflection, I guess you could say, both the good and the bad aspects of the person's character.
So acknowledging the full picture, celebrating the good, but also confronting the not so good.
Exactly. And Gurdjieff, he seemed to admire this. It embraced the reality of death without sugarcoating it, a way of honoring the person's whole humanity and using their life as a reminder of our own mortality.
This ties back into his focus on facing challenges, doesn't it? Using those difficult experiences as opportunities to learn and grow. Like he's saying, even death can be a teacher, if we're open to it.
Profound. And maybe by facing that reality, our own death, the death of others, we can gain a deeper appreciation for life itself, a greater sense of urgency in our own pursuits. We'll explore this more as we continue diving into his thoughts on the soul and what might lie beyond this life.
Those remembering feasts, huh? Intense, but kind of fascinating too. Really grappling with the person's whole legacy, not just the good stuff.
Yeah, definitely not how we do things now. And I know it can sound harsh to us, maybe even disrespectful, but Gurdjieff, he saw it as more honest, and in the end, more meaningful. True respect, for him, meant acknowledging the whole person, not just, putting them on a pedestal after they're gone.
It all connects back to that idea of self-development, conscious evolution, facing reality head-on, the good and the bad, using it all to fuel growth.
Exactly. Avoiding those tough truths about ourselves, about life and death, it only holds us back. Those feasts, they were a way to confront mortality and use that to appreciate life more deeply.
Like no more sugarcoating. Let's get real about life's fragility and actually use that knowledge to, live more fully, more intentionally.
That's it. That's the essence of it.
Yeah.
And those verses from that ancient Persian song, they really bring this home. The soul, it's something that goes beyond our physical existence, right? It's like he's saying there's more to us than just this body. And by working on our inner world, we're preparing for what comes next, what lies beyond.
I get that. It's so easy to get caught up in the day-to-day, the material stuff, and lose sight of the bigger picture. Gurdjieff, he's reminding us we're not just physical beings. We have this spiritual side that can connect us to, something greater.
And that connection, that's what gives our lives meaning, purpose. It helps us face challenges, use suffering to learn and grow, and ultimately to go beyond those limitations of our ego.
This has been quite a journey. Gurdjieff's life, his teachings, his methods. So much to unpack. What stands out to you as the key takeaway from all this?
For me, it's self-observation, conscious effort. Gurdjieff, he challenged us to actually participate in our own evolution, to move beyond just copying others or searching for those easy answers. Real transformation, it takes willingness to see our flaws, to embrace challenges, to become more aware of ourselves and the world around us.
I agree. Not an easy path, that's for sure. But it's a path towards, I think, greater freedom, being more genuine, more fulfilled. Gurdjieff's work, even unfinished, it's like a map for those willing to take that journey of self-discovery.
And as we wrap up, I'm still struck by how deep and complex his ideas are. A true visionary, shaking things up, forcing us to confront those big questions about life, death, the whole thing.
He definitely gave us a lot to think about, and to our listeners, I encourage you, keep exploring Gurdjieff. See how his ideas resonate with your own lives. Maybe, just maybe, that challenging perspective will spark something in you, a desire to go deeper into your own world and uncover the potential that's waiting there. Until next time, keep searching, keep questioning, and keep diving deep.